Welcome back to the channel, and first of all, just thanks for everyone for watching and everyone for the subscribing. I only started this as a bit of fun really, and we've got 300 subscribers now or something. I know it's nothing compared to YouTube numbers, but it's a start, you know, and we're only trying to grow the channel from now on in. So I thought I'd do a video today about my Range Rover and a 12-month review of my total spends, costs, fuel, insurance, tax, etc., and just give you a full breakdown of how much this car cost me to run and how much it has been, and if I've had any issues with it over the last 12 months. So first of all, we'll probably want to talk about how much I paid for the car. I don't know, I might have mentioned this in a previous video. I paid £1,500 for this car when I bought it, and when I bought it, I fixed it. It had an air suspension problem, so I fixed the air suspension and then I sold it for £3,000, and 12 months later I decided I'd buy it back, and I got the opportunity to buy it back off the fella, so I offered him 1,500 quid for it and he took my money. So it's the second time I bought this car now. When I bought it back, it had an injector problem, so that's why I got it cheap. And the only reason I bought this one back is because when I owned it the first time, I knew it was mint when I sold it. There was no issues with it whatsoever. I had full service history, mainly done by a main dealer. The last few service histories were done by Range Rover specialists. Obviously, as the car gets older, people start cutting back on the costs and use a specialist rather than a main dealer. So I knew it was a good base to start from. So anyway, when I bought this, I managed to fix the injector problem by, well, I assumed it was an injector that had gone wrong. I plugged it into my diagnostic tool and I'd gone through it and I'd worked out that it was injector number 5 that had gone down. So after me going through that, I pinned out the wiring loom, made sure everything was working, and it was. I managed to get an injector off eBay for 100 quid brand new, and I fitted it and the problem didn't go away. And I thought, we've got real problems here, but I couldn't work out why it wasn't running properly because I pinned out the loom. Anyway, with further investigation, what I'd found out was when I'd pinned out the loom, one of the lug nuts, if you like, on injector 5 wasn't making a proper connection on the injector. So the injector was working fine, it was just the loom, but when I pinned it out, I'd used pieces of copper wire, and because I put copper wire in, that had made the connection, so it gave me a false reading, if you like, about the loom. So in the end, it cost me, I think it was about 10p to put it right. So I'd already put a new injector in it though, so I just left that in. So while I was in there, I did all my injector seals, and it's been fine ever since. I've not had any running issues with this car whatsoever. I've had a couple of starting problems with it, and that was purely just the battery give up, which is common, it can happen on any vehicle. So I put a new battery in it and it's been fine ever since. So in a minute I'll pull over and I'll go through some of these costs that I've spent over the last 12 months, just to give you a rough idea of what it cost me to own. Right, I've just pulled over now and I'm going to give you a rundown on what I've spent on this car in parts, etc., over the last 12 months. So to bring it back up to scratch, I had to buy injector seals, which cost me £7. I did an EGR bypass kit on it, which was 35 quid. I've done gearbox filter kit, which was £30, and gearbox oil, which was £50. I changed that twice. When I first got it, I dropped the oil, put new filters in, filled it back up, drove it and did 2,000 miles, and then dropped the oil again and give it another full fill up of gearbox oil, just give it a good flush through. I did my air suspension compressor, which was 12 quid. I've done an engine service and oil, which was £30. I spent £20 on a crankcase filter. I've done £100 on an injector, 2 ball joints that cost me 16 quid, 2 track rod ends which cost me 16 quid. I did pads all round and 2 wear sensors, which was £76. I did me brake pipes on it, which were 150 quid. I've done flexi rear brake hoses at the back, which cost me 40 quid. Then I needed a tyre. I managed to find a brand new tyre with on a rim somebody's old spare one, and it cost me 40 quid, and it was a £150 tyre for 40 quid. I've had 2 part ones on it for £30 each. I then had a blower motor problem with this when my heater stopped working. I changed the resistor, which cost me 13 quid, didn't solve the problem. I then put a heater blower in there, which was 40 quid, and now it's working fine again now. Then I just had an MOT on it with 40 quid, and it failed on 2 lower arms, so they were £50 for the pair, and it cost me £100 fitting, because I spent 2 days trying to get them off myself, and they didn't want to come off, and I didn't have time. I had other things to be doing, so I just paid a local garage. They charged me £100 cash, and they fitted them for me, and £40 for an MOT, if I've not mentioned that. So in total, in parts, I spent £953 in parts this year so far. Then my biggest expense by far is fuel. So I'll do parts, tax and insurance. I pay £360 a year in tax and £500 a year in insurance. Insurance will differ depending on who you are, policies, etc. So in total for parts, tax and insurance, it comes into £1,813. Then by far my biggest outgoing on this car is fuel. For the year, I've roughly spent £4,175 in fuel. Adding those together gives me a grand total of just under £6,000, £5,988. So average that out over the 12 months, it cost me roughly £500 a month to drive around in this car. That's everything: maintenance, insurance, tax and fuel. And I've done roughly 7,000 or 8,000 miles. I might have done more than that, I can't remember, but I've done a fair few miles considering I use it for work, you know. So that gives me a grand total of just under £6,000. And other than that, I've not had any really major problems with it. It's been mint. And going back to, would I buy one again? Would I take this car on again for another year, etc.? For the motoring cost, for £500 a month with fuel and insurance and tax, I don't think there's many cars out there that will beat this on costs for comfort. This car is so comfy. It's one of the best cars I've ever had. I use it for towing, so it can pull 3.5 ton comfortably. I use it to move tractors, trailers, a lot of heavy equipment around, so you need something that can pull 3.5 ton legally on the road. It will probably pull a lot more than 3.5 ton. These things are really capable. The only thing I don't like about this car is its gearbox. These automatic gearboxes, they're so comfy to drive and use. They're so smooth changing gears, but I like to drive a manual. It has a mind of its own, this gearbox. If it wants to change, it changes. If it doesn't change, it doesn't change. I've tried flushing the gearbox through just to help it along, and it did improve the situation dramatically. But ever since then, I've not, I don't know, if they did a manual, I'd have a manual version, but obviously they don't do a manual version, so you're stuck with the gearbox itself. And yeah, I definitely would probably buy another one. If the same opportunity came around now and I knew what I knew now 12 months ago, I would be happy to pay the £500 a month to drive around in this car. It's never let me down. Every now and then I have a few little niggles with it, but that's with every car on the road. You have to maintain them. They're expensive cars to buy and they're quite expensive to maintain. These are quite old now, so the parts have definitely come down a lot in value. It's not like buying parts for a new Range Rover. You can get the parts now almost similar prices to a modern day Ford Fiesta, Focus. You know, the parts aren't extortionate anymore. There's so many aftermarket parts out there as well now, and they are good quality parts. So it's not like you put in cheap crap on it, you know what I mean? It is what it is. But going back to the review, I would probably recommend one of these to anyone, and at the moment you can pick these up rather cheap purely because of the fuel costs at the minute. They're getting so expensive to run, people are getting rid of them. But if you are going to buy one, you've got to look out for those main things. Service history is a must. If you haven't got a service history with it, I wouldn't go near it, because you don't know how well it's been looked after. And if you haven't got a service history book, 9 times out of 10 the likelihood that everything else has been neglected as well. So because this had full service history, most of the things had been kept up to date with, you know, brake pipes, ball joints, tires, brakes. It's not been let to, if you let these cars become scrap, they take a lot of money to bring them back to life. But if you get one that's been looked after, the chances are that it'll only need small regular maintenance and it will stay running. This has done 187,000 miles and it still runs like it's brand new. The engine never misses a beat, but that just shows you what changing the oil actually does to an engine. It really does improve its quality of life. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the video, and it's been a really good review. Actually, I actually would recommend one of these cars to anyone for the comfort, the driving ability, their capability off-road and on-road. Right, I'm back on the move again now. I just halfway through doing that and my memory filled up, so I've had to do that little bit again. So I was saying the capability of these cars on-road and off-road is amazing. Realistically, it surprises me every time what this thing can actually do. So I would recommend one to anyone, really. I had a tractor on the back with a trailer the other week, and it must have been coming in at right on the limit of being legal. We were 3.5 ton, pretty much right on the limit, and I had to get it out of a steep climb. It come out of a farm and it was in a really tight spot, and I had to get it in a steep climb, and I was panicking a bit. I thought, this isn't going to pull this out of here. Anyway, I put it in low range, and I literally let my foot off the brake, give it gentle acceleration, and it just pulled me straight out. I was so impressed with how much power this thing will actually throw out, especially low down. It's a very, very torquey engine. Mine's the 3 litre straight 6 petrol, straight 6 diesel engine, the BMW M57 engine, and it's the only one I would buy. People talk about the TD V8s. That would be another engine I would maybe buy, but turbos have the issues with them. What they seem to do is the seals go in the turbo, they eat your oil away, and people don't check their oil often enough, and the oil ends up being in a dry sump. They overheat and burn everything in the engines out, or you lose turbos, and it's a massive expense to put them right. Then you've got the TD6s, which are on the newer models, and the crankshaft snap on them all the time. Very, very common with them, so I wouldn't touch them. I don't know anything about the V8s, the petrol, but obviously, as you can imagine, the fuel costs running one of them is going to be extortionate. But for a base model, this car, I would recommend it to the world. But I'm not selling it, by the way. Right, sound. Catch us on the next one. Ta-ra.